So AI has many applications, and one of those is the process of machine learning,
Mhm.
where an algorithm is given a database of images.
But
Um,
you were saying go on because I think this is super interesting and it coming after Jung, Jung, Jung is is a very important information because we kind
sure, sure.
of get a little more ground to these issues.
There's a broad range of artists who input artwork into AI, into an algorithm.
Mhm.
Then there are different, well, there's another, uh, perhaps another direction of artists
Mhm.
who generate uh, interactions through the AI. But you have artists who, like Jung that we saw last time, who input
Mhm.
data.
Yeah. So
And
really using data as a form of aesthetics to a point. Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah, because then the data becomes the aesthetic. So we are forced to kind of, our humanity is forced to to enter that specific, let's say, diagram, right?
Sure,
And try
sure.
to understand it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's quite different because it's almost the opposite of what the artist is about,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's,
And I think with the other direction, there are examples that are used a lot in things like Photoshop nowadays, or
mhm.
in, social media and Snapchat. There are a lot of uses of AI that do
Oh yeah,
something
yeah.
style transfer.
Yeah, I have seen that.
Yeah. So
But
that kind
it,
of thing, it's bringing up the question of uh, is it possible to somehow uh, simulate or integrate an
mhm,
artist into an AI process?
right. And
Um,
I don't think it is possible completely because we are humans.
right,
We
right.
depend on chance in many moments of our. I mean, go back to Bergson, right? We are in the moment, so we
Sure.
can't really strategize everything that is in a kind of let's say encoded uh, avenue in a way in which we don't have that moment, right? That
Sure. Sure.
not knowing in the moment. So, and I think that to me, that is the main question today, even in society, right? Should art be so descriptive and prescriptive of technology or any form of anticipated, um, you know, uh, what would be the word? Anticipated, almost like fraction, right? See, if you're thinking math, right? So it's almost like you already know that kind of how you are going to put together that whole idea in a mathematical way, which is not so different than technological ways, just a different form of not just the image orientation of what it is, but
Mhm.
also through the the let's say the visionistic kind of understanding of that whole process, right?
Sure. Sure.
And that is similar to math. I mean, we go back
Mm.
to the one, right? We enter the 10, we go back to the one. So
Mm.
let me just to say a little more about this because today in society, not just in terms of art, but even in terms of speech or behavior, social behavior, everything is within a code, and that code has to be. If you don't follow that code, it's like people cannot understand you. That is not human because humanity is about the chance abilities, the possibility of also of not just intuitive grasping another person, but entering that let's say that space in which language can transform, right? So it's a little bit like thinking the writing of Dostoevsky, for example, which is very much about that. It's very much about everyone, but it's also about chaos. It's not one single person there is more important than another. Everyone has something to add, right? So, okay, let's go on. And I just wanted to say that because I want us to, at some point, go back to that idea of how important is creativity and originality.
Sure, yeah. I think there's, yeah, I suppose just in closing that point for now, I think there's also within the process of machine learning, from what I found out in researching the subject, um, there's a process which is not quite the same as traditional mathematics, which is
Sure.
it's what's called an adversarial network. And what happens is options are kind of compared backwards and forwards by the algorithm, by the process. And it's not always clear in advance what the outcome will be.
Yeah.
And I think the what's interesting as a kind of cultural phenomenon is that there's perhaps an element of faith in AI processes, which goes back to the idea of scientific certainty, accuracy.
Fate, you mean F-A-T-E or F?
Faith, like belief.
Oh, okay, fate. Okay.
The trust in a sense. So and that's where we have these issues like deep fakes, because we see something on the screen and the technology invites us to trust imagery, to believe in its truth. So that's why I find it very interesting when artists work with deteriorating the image, making it less less saturated, less hyper real somehow.
Yeah. But let's say that you get an artist that visually, that in his process or her process is actually deteriorating on purpose, like Bacon,
Sure, exactly.
So how do you look at that from an AI or adversarial network perspective?
Well, I guess what the process would do, what the AI would do, is follow instructions. And so if the instruction was imitate how this looks, then it would be able to try and do that.
But that is not being adversarial. That is kind of
it's yeah, I mean the term there, it's really about what the AI would do. It's a little bit dry, but step by step, it would generate, for instance, two images and compare them. And then it would evaluate and say, well, this one is better because it matches more factors in the original.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's a bit like an internal dialogue where it's constantly talking to itself and trying to make, to follow the instruction. But then it depends so much on what the instruction is.
There is a strategy to it, and that strategy is almost military. It goes back to the very early strategies of war, because you have to find a way to overcome that, even if because it is adversarial network, you are going to overcome. You're not going to, become like that, right? So I think that it is a very important aspect, but it still goes back to that duality, right? So, and I am seeing that AI potentiality in the world today allows us to become more creative rather than just go back to the the first tendencies of humanity, which were become adversarial or succumb to it and become like it, right? Does that make sense? So how do we use that idea in Anna Riedler was to utilize it for her own sake, but yet she kind of found a middle point between chaos and structure, right? And how is in your work that you see this? Because I know you are also referring to that. Yes.
Yeah. So, well, in my work, what happens is it's a kind of similar process where I take the starting point of an image. So the idea is that someone participating in my installation would bring with them an image that represents a memory for them, which is whether it's a photo from a family album or an image from their phone.
So it could be on the phone, right? Just something
Yeah.
that happens
Sure.
automatically, without planning. Yeah.
But then the process then takes what is you'd expect a very clear image and puts it through a transformation. So the transformation is turning it into something which is different from the original. So it kind of interprets the image into following the process we were talking about before of some kind of style transfer.
So this is an AI adversarial network style?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you are using that through your phone or through what? At the time that is happening, let's say.
You're using it through the phone or through an iPad. Eventually, you could use it through a headset, but my kind of idea was to try and make it more democratic and not, a high-end niche experience. But it works in two ways, partly through the phone, partly through physical sculptures.
Okay.
So the idea is to have an interface which is a tactile object in real space. A little bit like the idea of a keyboard used to be, or a mouse, some kind of physical instrument that would allow the interaction.
So, no, just before, how does that process, is that an intuitive process for you, or you just enter the data that you already have set, or do you actually have to go with the flow also as it is happening there in time, right?
Well, the participant would go with the flow.
Okay.
So it works in that you have an interaction with a virtual object. So through your phone, let's say the phone, you'll be able to see the interpretation of your memory. So memory, the first step is that the memory automatically becomes a three-dimensional object in the field of view of the phone.
So let me give an example. Let's say that the memory is someone is eating an orange, let's say. Okay. And then you take that memory and you transform that orange into a beautiful flower, and the flower is full of other flowers growing in a garden. Instead of an orange, it becomes something else.
It's not that's a different process. That's an option. To stay with that example, the image, it would be an image of someone eating an orange.
Okay.
That's given to the installation. They would give it. So that image then becomes a little bit like an abstract sculpture of a person eating an orange. But to a point where it's very difficult to tell, is it really an orange or is it just a sphere? Who is the person? It kind of goes back to what we were saying a few minutes ago about the deterioration of the image.
Yes, but it's not completely deteriorated. It's like you're using database, perhaps symbols, right? That will kind of enter that mesh. It's like you're creating a big pot, right? You're putting
Sure.
everything in. Okay.
So yeah, it's not completely unrecognizable, but
Sure. Sure.
the thing is, because it becomes different to the image
Mm-hmm.
and it has a presence in space,
Mm-hmm.
means then that the person participating can first of all wonder, is that really my memory?
Uh-huh.
It's a
Okay.
new experience,
Yes.
which is in a way interacting with a memory in
Yeah.
the present.
Yeah.
And then there's another process, which is where the sculpture and the geometry of the installation comes in, which is placing the memory in
Mhm.
space.
Yeah, in memory, I think it's a very important topic because we're going to
Sure.
leave that for the second part, right? Memory and consciousness, and then maybe consciousness on the third part.
Sure.
But I think, yes, that is really a great direction because it's not just about aesthetics, it's not just about form or how we perceive it, right? How we are perceiving it, or how that object looks like something else, or is no longer what I thought I had before. So it is the memory's transformation is also here not a form of, let's say, becoming overwhelmed, right? Oh, I don't remember anymore. No, it's the opposite. It's like opening new paths of interpretation and perception. So it's like entering a spectrum, right? It's like entering a spectrum. And I think that that is actually a very good healing thing for humans because we tend to abide by memory. So if we don't remember something, we think, oh my God, I'm going insane. And instead we can utilize that lack of memory to expand our potential capacity, right, in the imagination.
Sure. And the
And I think
imagination
that's what you're
also,
focusing on then.
yeah, absolutely. And also there's another thing with the imagination, which is that the less information is present in the memory, in the image,
Mhm.
the more it becomes a symbol. So
Mhm.
for me, it goes back to the kind of the memory palace uh, construct that the Romans had, where you would create a kind of literally a palace environment in your mind
Mhm.
and place memory.
Ideal is an
Yes,
ideal, right?
it's an imaginary.
Yes, it's an imaginary ideal because a palace is a form of beauty, support, right? Is an
True,
ideal
true,
form. So
true.
before you go on, because this is very important.
Sure, sure.
So I want to understand this clearly because in this work, let's say the eating of orange is becoming a multiple, showing multiple possibilities of what one's memory actually was,
Mhm.
right? And in those many possibilities, there might be an orange, but that might not be the most important topic.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. So it's in a way entering psychology here because it's
Mhm.
entering our, let's say, the hidden aspects of ourselves that sabotage what we want to remember, right?
Right.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good. I like that because now we are making some sense out of everything we are.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, because the as you say, Denise, the orange.
Mhm.
In remembering the orange, we might remember where the orange was picked from, or who was there with us eating the orange, or what happened afterwards.
Yeah.
So it
Or the
becomes like,
fact that the orange was taken from you and
right,
completely
yeah,
taken from you. So you were kind of hoping that that was still there. So living in a dream, living in a kind of a state of delusion, right?
right, Right.
and not dealing with the fact that the orange was taken from you. And I think we tend to do that. We humans tend to forget the bad parts of things, or to emphasize only on the bad parts and forget the good parts that came after or even during that process.
Sure, sure. Selective memory.
Yes.
Yeah.
We all do that. So, in a way, what you are saying is you are giving them a selective memory so
Mhm.
they can, the subject, the person who is being a participant in that experiment, that art event, right, is not knowing that he's entering a psychological look at, more depth into
Sure.
one's own self, or maybe perception, right? The perception that we tend to use in our everyday appearance or everyday sense of being. So, is that very different from Anna Riedler? Just let's make a kind of a clear
Yeah.
connection there.
The main difference is the tactile. So in Anna Riedler's work, it's a visual piece,
Mhm.
and it kind of belongs to the territory of cinema, video,
Right.
visual.
Just
Uh,
visual.
so the difference with my piece is it's working with uh, the two key elements of physical sculpture
Mhm.
and augmented reality
Mhm.
onto that physical sculpture. And the key thing there is touch.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
what
I
happens
know,
is,
I know. When
yeah,
you say that sculpture, touch, the first thing
sure.
that comes is touch. And that also makes us feel the importance of materiality there in
Yeah.
that way.
Although in brackets, I mean, it's interesting that many sculptures are not accessible to be touched in galleries,
Mhm. I
particularly
know.
museums.
I do understand the importance in your work about that aspect of touch versus vision, right? That duality, especially in the gallery setting, that you cannot touch the work. But at the same time, if you're looking through your phone, right? Let's say that you are seeing that memory different in your phone. If you want to do that, use a different kind of technology there. Uh, you can be addressing different forms of how you actually touch, and that might want to make you touch, right? That might want to make you go in the work and feel it. This is the reality. Let me touch it,
Sure.
And three-dimensional reality is very important in that sense. Yeah.
I think there's something particularly intriguing about the idea of, being able to touch a memory,
Mhm.
which in in a straightforward sense is
Mhm.
impossible because we have an abstract recollection of memories, and that's also part of what I find interesting of it kind of connects to the idea of an imprint or um, an object that carries memories, associations. So that process of touching,
Mhm.
particularly with an abstract piece of work, uh, it creates a lot of unexpected interactions because the touch can produce associations which I'm not controlling, and perhaps
Right
the
now, I would love to touch that work that is behind
so
you.
yeah, this is one of the pieces in the video. Yeah, these
Yeah,
are the prototypes of the
it's
sculpture.
beautiful. But there is an aspect that is almost impressionistic, although you can touch,
Right,
but it's very, like there is a very, let's say, diminutive amount of information in
exactly.
terms of line. And on the other side, you have this growing physicality, which is
Sure,
more generous, in to
sure.
the viewer's perception. because then you are bringing the importance of both things, the visual, but you are putting the first being the sculptural, obviously.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I should say also that the sculpture kind of evolved from doing much more representative sculptures that were
Mhm.
specific to certain landscapes and certain forms and figures.
Yeah.
And in doing this project, what I tried to do was to intentionally disconnect from a direct reference. So the sculptures are abstract,
Mhm.
and they're abstract so that it allows the the the, the people participating
Mhm.
to overlay their own specificity, their own memories.
Mhm. Yeah.
But the key
But
thing that, yeah,
no, no, say the key thing. That's important. Go ahead.
the key thing is a kind of grid. Now, not a grid in the sense of a chessboard, but more a bit like a beehive.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm working with the geometry is something we find in, for instance, in one of Borges's writings on the Library of Babel.
Uh-huh. I
Um,
love his work. His
right,
writing is amazing. And I
absolutely.
mean, that's why I like these ideas that you're bringing also, because they are so connected to writing, to thinking,
Absolutely.
to a lot of things. It's not
Sure.
just aesthetic in terms of
Yeah.
visual. Yeah.
So it's the idea of producing enough structure so
Mhm.
that there is a kind of an infinite um, system
Yeah.
available for the person participating to place, retrieve, interact. Um, so
Mhm.
it's a kind of an exercise in restraint,
It's
in
a
a sense.
much more contemporary exercise in restraint because it's bringing also the importance of technology into it
Sure, sure.
and how we perceive vision today is very different than before. There's no subliminal
Sure.
aspects in vision. So in a way, you are bringing back the subliminal by providing the possibility of the imaginary of language into it.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think if I compare this with Cildo Meirelles' work, I don't know if you know Cildo Meirelles, a Brazilian artist, you should look at it because he started working with this idea between the different paths of one's imagination by focusing on the corner of a space. The corners are
Right.
those spaces that are not utilized, but yet they are the main substance of all
Hmm.
the sides. So,
Interesting.
and I think that just going back to your timing, because this was in the 1980s, 70s, and 80s. So 60s, actually. It depends on the work, because he started in the 60s. He could have started earlier, but his earlier works were in the 60s. And then you have, obviously, during the dictatorship. So there was uh, a lot of intention to speak freely in a
Mhm.
time in which it was impossible to speak freely. And then, so therefore, the art, the creative direction of thinking, allow that to the people that understood his work. So,
Right.
and I think we are now living on a similar tendency in the world. It's not that we have wars going on right here in the US or in the UK, but there are places that are going through very difficult kind of political systems and which go back to the past in a way. It's something that we could never imagine that would happen. It just happened. It's like people don't have a way forward, they go back, you know?
Right.
So, and I think it's important to consider imagination and creativity under those moments. And that's
Sure.
what you're bringing. You are bringing new ways of looking at the influence of AI technology but also bringing the importance of originality, of creativity, the connection with psychology, because we cannot be without psychology and philosophy. That is for sure. If we let go of that, we are completely incapable of communication. Okay, we won't communicate with our samenesses. We won't communicate.
Yeah.
Because communication is that ability to fly out of the code. And that's what you're doing here. Because no one can communicate just following rules.
Sure.
Then there are no people. It's just
yeah. And I think also in that it's also about the interaction, which is very important.
Yeah.
Communicating
Yeah.
it can be done physically in space. It can be done by linking sculptures together. It's something which is very much talked about in terms of the kind of installations that use AI.
Mhm.
But very often the interaction can be quite limited.
Right.
And here I'm trying to place the interaction as the key event,
Yes.
and the
Yes.
rest is kind of secondary. It's
I'm even thinking about another comparison to that, which is, I can't remember his name now, but I will bring it on our second meeting. It's this playwright that was very important also in Brazil, in Rio, where I grew up, that he would allow the public in the theater to have a voice in the play. So they would say something about what was happening, interject, make a question, protest, do something that would create a little bit, going back to the Greek theater, the arena theater, in which the public also would visually and physically and even in their psyches and into their bodies would react to what was happening in the play. So I think that is another aspect that is very interesting.
So what I was going to say is we see that with children still.
Yes,
so
go ahead.
we see that with children very much, that they're less self-conscious.
Yeah.
And when children watch a play, they'll typically say, "No, he's behind you," or "Look behind you," and they don't
they're
know these.
totally
Yeah, they
yeah.
don't follow the norms that we
Yeah.
as adults do of not speaking in the theater.
Yeah. And I think that is also play.
Sure.
So, and the idea of play is what you're bringing back.
Yes.
The notion of play.